There was a very revealing moment in the hearings of Merrick Garland, Joe Biden's pick for Attorney General, in which Garland was asked by Senator Josh Hawley about assaults on federal property in places like Portland. Hawley says, "Do you regard assaults on federal courthouses or other federal property as acts of domestic extremism, domestic terrorism?" And Garland gives a very interesting answer. He goes, "Well, Senator, my own definition is the use of violence or threats of violence in an attempt to disrupt the democratic process. That is, according to him, domestic terrorism." Then he says, "So an attack on a courthouse while in operation, trying to prevent judges from actually deciding cases, that plainly is domestic extremism, domestic terrorism. An attack simply on a government property at night or any other kind of circumstances," he says, "is a crime," but he's not willing to go so far as to call it domestic terrorism. So you can see what's going on here. Basically, Garland is trying to say January 6th, an attack on our democratic process. Why? Because it occurred during the day when democratic processes were going on. Antifa attacks, all of them, as long as they're not occurring while judicial processes are underway, doesn't really qualify. Now, let me say, first of all, why I think this is bogus. It's special pleading. It's a cover for one type of crime, actually for a worse type of crime, while it's an attempt to exaggerate another type of offense. First of all, in what way did the march on the Capitol and the occupation of the Capitol, quote, disrupt the democratic process? The truth of it is, it didn't. The democratic process was delayed for, what, an hour, two, and then proceeded normally. So we're talking here about not a suspension or ending of the democratic process, certainly not any kind of a meaningful coup. There was no coup even attempted. This was basically an attempt to try to get the legislators' attention. They cleared the room. The protesters were cleared out. They came back. The democratic process resumed. There was no lethal threat to the democratic process at all. By contrast, let's just say you take an attack on the Supreme Court, an attack on federal courthouses. Those do disrupt the democratic process. If you burn a courthouse down, what happens to all the cases that occur in that courthouse? They obviously are going to be suspended, and certainly for a lot longer than an hour or two. In fact, the message of burning the courthouse down is that the very thing that the courthouse represents, due process, equal justice under the law, having a procedure so that criminal defendants and civil cases can be heard, adjudicated by neutral party. All of that is under attack when you set fire to a courthouse. And yet, according to Merrick Garland, that's in a little different category. It shouldn't be taken all that seriously. Now, I think the deeper significance of what Garland is getting at here is he is obsessively concerned with protecting one type of liberty while ignoring another type that is equally, if not more important. The French writer Benjamin Constant, many years ago, wrote an essay called "The Liberty of the Ancients as Opposed to the Moderns." He was talking about two different types of liberty. And he said that for the ancient Greeks, liberty meant nothing more than showing up in the public square, the agora, and casting your vote. This was the sole liberty that the Greeks had. They didn't have freedom of speech. They certainly didn't have freedom of religion. They didn't have normal types of liberty that we think of today, but they had the liberty to participate in a democratic process. And it was direct democracy, not to elect representatives, but to vote directly on issues of the day. And this is what Constant calls the liberty of the ancients. Modern liberty, says Constant, is about living your ordinary life. It's about going about your business. It's about being able to eat in a restaurant without being terrorized, start a business without having your business torched or threatened. It's about ultimately trying to live your life according to a script that you write for yourself. And I think this liberty for ordinary Americans is more important because it affects our daily life. We cast our ballot every 2 or 4 years, so that's one type of liberty. Let's call that the ancient type. But the modern type, says Constant, is the ordinary liberty of being able to interact with people, to say what you think, to go to church on Sunday if you choose to assemble, to participate in civic community, and so on. Now, Antifa attacks all that. They threaten businesses and they burn them. They pull people out of their cars, they pull people out of restaurants, and they threaten them. So Antifa is interfering not just with courthouse liberty, but also with liberty in the ordinary sense of life. But see, for Merrick Garland, he doesn't care about that type of liberty. He doesn't care about the ordinary liberty of the ordinary citizen. But why do we have a Justice Department? Do we really need a Justice Department to protect the already heavily protected buildings of Congress? That's why we have a DOJ? No. We have a DOJ so that justice is neutrally administered to ordinary citizens conducting their ordinary business in the ordinary course of life. Something else that Garland said struck me. He was asked about illegal immigrants crossing the border, and he was asking if that was a crime. Here's what he said. Listen.
Talk a little bit more about the law enforcement challenges at the border, which I know a number of other members have brought up with you. Just a fundamental question. Do you believe that illegal entry at America's border should remain a crime?
Well, I haven't thought about that question. I just haven't thought about that question.
He hasn't thought about it. He really doesn't know. This is the nominee for the chief judicial officer in the country. Illegal immigration involves the breaking of laws. This is the police agency of the government entrusted with enforcing the law. And gee, he just hasn't thought about it. He doesn't know if it's a crime. So what you have here is, and I think it is a feigned ignorance. It's not that he hasn't thought about it. He's actually an intelligent man. He's thought about it. But he doesn't want to say that this is blatant lawbreaking. Of course it's a crime. Now, how it should be treated, what level of crime, what appropriate penalties are, that can all be debated. The very fact that he's unwilling to even say it's a crime shows you that he knows that he's part of a party that wants to sanction, to allow, to permit, even to encourage this particular type of criminality, this particular type of lawbreaking. So how ironic it is that we have a Justice Department that doesn't seem all that interested in the basic principles of justice, at least not under this dude. And the only kind of lawbreaking that matters to him is lawbreaking committed by the other side, lawbreaking that the Democrats are helped by, or somehow are helped politically by. That's the kind of lawbreaking that they just haven't given a lot of thought to.